Here I come.
Donna highlighting. Yeah, let's go.
How y'all doing? This Louise, you done jinxed me.
What?
Who jinxed you?
I always tell that because we both had problems with our Kindle. This poem here I actually posted on Magic Jack's page, and he the one said, "Oh, you're ready to come back to Austin." You don't remember that poem, Soaring?
Was it on my page or was it in
Word Cook, yeah. Still is your page. It's called Soaring. It's a short poem because if you know me, that's all I do is short poems. So, in the shadow of the black sun, the epic of fantasy of fun, soaring over the clouds during an early morning sunrise. Through a looking glass, you see the surprise, the return of the rain man in the solar sky. There is a moment in time where the clouds to walk amongst the emerald stardust of the clouds. What good is life without a spark of madness? In this world we live in, insanity is not contagious like a peppermint headdress. To always be that conflict in the clouds, but in the long run, that is the end. Thank you.
Yay.
Michael.
Well, that was fast.
I told you.
All right, this one's shorter, probably about half the length of the previous one. It's mostly world building and dialogue experiment. It's called Mushrooms. This is completely illegal, you know, Simon explained as he tried to shove the old, half-rusted bookshelf disguising the tunnel entrance aside. It refused to budge, even when Simon put his full weight on it and spit a shower of powdery red flakes in protest. Ugh, help me with this, Simon grumbled. Mushroom hunting, Jude said as he stepped over to the other side of the bookshelf. Somehow, that side was even rustier. Jude made sure to tug the sleeves of his canvas jacket down to cover his hands before he grabbed the frame of the bookshelf. Why? We have mushrooms inside the wall. Yeah, Simon said, giving it another shove. With Jude's help, the bookshelf stuttered across the floor with a metallic shriek revealing the tunnel. Someone had knocked enough bricks out of the wall to form a hole, maybe 3 or 4 feet in diameter, just large enough for 2 15-year-old boys to squeeze through. Simon brushed his hands clean on his jacket, leaving a rusty stain on the front, and stepped back to examine the hole. It's mutation shit, right? Commonwealth thinks if you eat mushrooms from outside, the radiation or the night fog will turn you into a mutant. Like, I don't know, you might grow an extra head, another pair of arms or something. Seriously, Jude snickered? You've been watching too many old horror movies. Hey, Simon said as he ducked through the hole, I like old horror movies. Vincent Price was a cinematic genius. Yes, I know, Jude said, passing Simon their backpacks through the hole. Are you done rhapsodizing yet? Why am I even friends with you, Simon said. Come on, let's get going before it gets dark out. It's not my fault that you're obviously in love with Vincent Price, Jude said, ducking low to squeeze through the hole. The corner of one of the intact bricks caught his side as he wriggled through. Ow, merde. Serves you right, Simon said, digging his backpack for a flashlight. It flickered into life a moment later, revealing the dusty interior of the tunnel. He examined it for a moment, then turned the flashlight beam down so he could see the directions he'd scrawled on the back of his hand. Okay, we go straight on for 100 yards, then take the right fork. The guy I talked to said there's a big patch of morels. Morels? Jude asked. I've heard of those. Yeah, Simon said, they grow wild out here. I don't think anyone inside the wall has actually managed to grow them, else they'd be able to drive a lot of hunters out here out of business. Well, what do they look like? They're like brown or yellow, and the cap is a texture that kind of looks like a honeycomb. Okay, and ask me before you pick anything, Simon said, starting down the tunnel. I know what I'm looking for, and we don't want to grab any false morels by accident. Toxic? Yeah, some people say cooking them makes them edible. But I know a guy who got really sick eating them once. Well, what do the false ones look like? Pretty similar to real morels. But the cap texture is more like a human brain. Yep, Jude said, too many horror movies. Shut up. Cute.
Donna.
More fiction.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a brief excerpt from my work in progress. My next book is called The Fourth Time. And it's actually, my main character in the book is someone who's kind of caught in this, am I crazy, am I not crazy? So anyway, this is just a brief excerpt. Boxing Day, Seth announced the next morning, no cooking allowed. Meg laughed. She figured they could make it through breakfast and lunch on Christmas leftovers, but she had her doubts about dinner. That might require going out to a restaurant or ordering pizza. Then she remembered that by late afternoon, she would be reporting for the residential portion of her training at Out There, Inc., which would last right up to the moon loop flight itself. Meg had recently won in a lottery a ticket on a civilian space flight around the moon and back. Breakfast of pie and coffee was more than satisfactory. Meg, would you mind reading over my draft for the talk I have to give at the Writers' Conference next month? Seth pleaded. I know you'll be disappearing into your training program, and I'd really like your thoughts before I do some final tweaking or major editing, depending. Meg agreed, and Seth emailed the text of his talk over to her. She quickly realized that it was at least partly about the conflict he was having with his agent and publisher. She read it through carefully and then reread it. I really like it, Seth, she said, especially this part. And she read out loud this passage. I am wondering if, when I publish this book, I should issue a warning to my readers, a warning that I am in fact a huge fan of ambiguity. Don't expect absolute resolution, absolute certainty about who my characters are and what they're experiencing. Reality itself is, after all, ambiguous, deeply, minutely, vastly ambiguous. The book I'm finishing now counts on this ambiguity to build alternative interpretations. Dare I say alternative storylines? If you hunger for certainty, you won't find satiety in my stories, nor anywhere else. Life is precariously crafted of uncertainty, ambiguity, probability, contingency, delusion. Its fragility can only be countered by accepting one's own fragility, which produces a kind of narrative weightlessness that moves gracefully through the most ambiguous storylines. Seth smiled. I'm still not sure I can get away with my time cryptors violating the basic premise of past, present, and future, but I'm really eager to see what kind of feedback I get from my fellow writers on the general issue of pressure to dumb down our stories to increase sales. Seth frowned and poked at the leg of the coffee table with the toe of his house slipper. When is your conference, Meg asked. Starts 8th of January, just a few days after you get back from your moon trip. I'm kind of hoping you might go with me. It's in Orlando. What do you think? Definitely. I love it when they schedule these conferences in cool places in between semesters. I was considering going to an archaeology meeting in Albuquerque, but since I didn't submit a paper, I'll gladly give that up to go with you. Meg set her iPad down on the coffee table and leaned back on the sofa, her head on Seth's shoulder. Which conference is it you're going to, she asked. It's the Science Fiction Writers Association. The theme this year is space tourism. Seth winced. So you wouldn't be planning to exploit your wife's experience with civilian space travel by any chance? Meg's effort to look angry was not convincing. God, Seth, what treachery. She began laughing uncontrollably. Yeah, okay, I should have mentioned that before inviting you. You can still renege. Airline tickets have not been purchased. Well, then you'd better get on it because they're probably getting costlier by the minute. Seth put both arms around Meg and kissed her cheek, which was now damp with tears of laughter. Meg knew this was one way she could give Seth a larger share in her experience, and she was happy to do it. Can I wear dark glasses with my Out There Nomex and pretend to be a real celebrity? Meg asked. After a lunch of leftover Indian food and a glass of wine, Meg packed a small bag with basic personal necessities. She would be wearing Out There jumpsuits and athletic gear most of the next week, except for the hours when she and her travel companions would be familiarizing themselves with the actual flight suits. Sybil the parrot flew in and perched on the edge of her bag, eyeing the contents with what looked like suspicion. Just going on a little journey, Sib, Meg said. I'll be back before you know it. The bird paced back and forth on the edge of the bag, muttering something that gradually shaped itself into a tune. Fly me to the moon. What did you say, Sybil? Meg knew that this was one of the phrases Sybil knew, but she had not uttered it since that day when Marie was putting her through her paces to demonstrate her repertoire. Fly me to the moon, play among the stars. Sybil sounded almost musical. Then she squawked loudly and flew over to Meg's shoulder. Kiss me, kiss me. She pecked Meg gently on the ear. You rascal, Meg said, as she turned her face to give Sybil a kiss on the beak. She called Seth to the room and tried fruitlessly to get Sybil to repeat her little performance. Sybil just paced up and down the edge of Meg's packed suitcase, bobbing her head, whistling and reciting, Can I help you? I swear she really did sing Fly Me to the Moon, Meg insisted. Yeah, Seth laughed. But knowing that bird, I guess I have to believe you. And now I have to go answer just a few more emails before we begin our drive to deliver you into the hands of Out There Inc. Fly me to the moon, Sybil crooned softly as Seth's footsteps faded away down the hallway.
Hey, Donna, that reminds me of one of those Looney Tune cartoons with a singing frog. It would never sing in front of anybody else. Awesome. Louise? Hello. Are you going to sing for us too?
A little bit, actually,
Yay.
just a wee bit, just a wee
Okay.
bit. A little show and tell, and then I do have a short poem. The show and tell is a proof of madness.
You got proof of it.
I have proof of my own madness. I signed up for the, what they call the General Unified Auditions or whatever. And I think the idea is that you audition and then they send your resume and your picture to 50 different, I have to have 50 copies of my resume and headshot. And then they send it out to all these different places and they think they can use you in a play or whatever. So I thought I'd try it because I want to perform outside of poetry, which is cool. So the madness is trying to get pictures and resumes printed and having all kinds of problems. They say they want 8 by 10 copies. You can't get 8 by 10 photo paper anywhere. I found it on Amazon and ordered it, but it will come after it's due. So that's out. So I tried printing photo paper on my own. The resume on the back, though, smeared, so that was out. So finally I said, I'll just do it on regular paper, and if they decide, you know, to disqualify me for that, I'll do it. So that's what I've done. And actually, I look thinner here because I don't have the dimensions quite right yet. I actually have solved that problem at home, and I also went to black and white. So I'm a little bit fatter than that. But I knew I had in my archives an old resume from when I did theater back in the 80s, and the last entry there was 1986. So I added the stuff about, my hosting open mics now, so it jumps from 1986 to 2013.
Wow.
So, but the other part of the madness is that I've decided not to do a monologue, but to sing a song for my musical chanteuse, the title song, which I'll do just a brief part of it at the end. I just exist in cabarets. I only live in my songs. Something like that. So that's the madness part. I did write 2 poems on Spark of Madness, and they covered kind of the territory that yours did, and they were much not as good and much more mundane. So I found this poem that I wrote at Harriet's group on Wednesdays. And if you don't know about the concept of Schrodinger's cat, look it up on Wikipedia or someplace. SCHROEDENINGER, Schrodinger. Anyway, here or there. We are here, we are there. Like Schrodinger's cat, we may be found or we may be missing, but we will always be in the box of memory, living in the hearts of those we know and love. Seek us in the grave of the vinyl disc, but we may appear in one track and not another. Find us or not, we are there, depending on where you look or when you drop the needle. Open to us and close again. See us there, alive or not. You will feel our breath. You will hear our voices. You will see our spirits. We are always there. Thank you.
That's a great idea, Louise. The double-sided resume with the headshot. I like that.
Well, that's the standard. Have your headshot on one side and resume on the other.
I always have teacher resumes, so I don't know. All right, next up, Nori.
Okay, so this is a short fiction piece that's sort of about like finding the small little fragments of sanity within the madness. A little tiny bit of history. This actually came from a short story that I wrote like 10 years ago when I was but a wee little middle schooler. And I recently found it in a box of old gunk at my mother's house and was like, you know, like obviously I wrote this when I was 13, so, you know, it looks like a 13-year-old wrote it, but there's little nuggets there I could use. So I did. So the longer piece is called The Garden of Everything, but this is just an excerpt from it. To the people in sedans and SUVs passing Tanglewood Trailer Park on South Texas Avenue, especially the ones who lived all the way out in Castlegate or Pebble Creek, it must have seemed like a sad dip in the ground full of sun-bleached boxes and dusty, dented-up Oldsmobiles and Grand Dams lying sloppily on either side of a crooked granite path. And to most of Tanglewood's residents, it probably didn't look much better. But to Rainbow McCrae, it was more of a wonderland than any place she'd seen outside of it, which wasn't a lot. Outside of College Station, she'd only visited Galveston once with her mom for a weekend when she was 3, and Houston during Christmas to visit her great aunt. She knew there must be prettier places beyond the water tower, but sometimes you have to make a place your own. Under the hot pink crepe myrtle tree between her trailer and the Zito's was the Mermaid Pond, a small depression in the ground that became a sloshy puddle whenever it rained. Because it came and went with the storms, Rainbow was convinced it was really a secret portal for mermaids, and when she looked into the miniature sunlight rainbows glinting off its surface, she saw them, dancing, their sequin tails catching colored beams of light. She'd take off her Jolly Roger flip-flops and dip her toes in, and suddenly she was no longer a skin-kneed girl too small for her age, covered in Hello Kitty band-aids, but a sea nymph with a glittery jade tail, roiling around with her fin sisters through turquoise waves scattered with iridescent prisms. She liked it better than Anderson Lagoon, filled with noise of all the kids from school who hung out there in summer, and where the chlorine was so strong she could smell it from the road. Alone with her feet in the mermaid pond, it was quiet. It was real. There was the succulent garden tattooed old Miss Gonzalez had planted that took up almost an entire lot, where Rainbow could crouch between the aloe vera and the teddy bear cactus and pretend to be a desert spirit with a rattlesnake's tail, or stick her plastic dinosaurs in the pots and suddenly be transported to a prehistoric landscape ruled by giants. She sometimes rode on the back of an apatosaurus through a land dotted with yucca and pepper trees. Other times she was a fierce velociraptor out on the hunt, curved toenails clicking against granite. She stretched out on her stomach and felt the coarse soil of the dinosaur garden, the heat from the Texas sun warming her hair and back, and pretended to be a plesiosaur snooing on some primordial beach. The dinosaur garden was one of her favorite places. The nuances of pot and meth that always lingered in the air never seemed to touch it. At the end of the crooked pink trail, just before the park ended and the woods began, was Goldfish World. It was a giant terracotta pot someone had filled with water and lilies and substrate and goldfish. It had been there so long, since before Rainbow was even born, moss and grasses and ivy had grown around and over it so that it looked part of the landscape. The water was murky, but if you looked carefully on hot summer days, you could see flashes of gold and orange and even red flitting across the surface before diving. Rainbow loved to watch for the goldfish and throw saltine cracker bits into the pot for them. She sometimes worried if they were happy there, if they missed or longed for freedom, but they seemed content enough. She wondered what it would be like to live like that, in a small, safe world surrounded by everyone you loved. Goldfish World was also an excellent vantage point for spying on Mars, who lived in the trailer closest to the edge of the woods. Mars's porch was covered in animal skulls and carved wooden staffs with crystals hot glued at the ends. There were pots full of white sage, lavender, and tobacco, leather canvases with rune symbols sketched onto them in charcoal, homemade rickety-looking dream catchers put together from twigs, yarn, and found bird feathers, statues of gods with animal heads, a tapestry of the sun surrounded by Celtic knots against a blue background hanging behind the screen door, and an African gray parrot that lived in a large cage under the porch roof. Rainbow wasn't sure what his name was, but he was very beautiful with a knowing face, so she named him Albert. Her mom, Ashley, had forbidden her from approaching Mars's house, said prison had fucked him up and now he was weird and believed strange things. But Rainbow took every opportunity to spy on the house, especially when Mars had friends over and they would play cards on the porch. Only they weren't regular cards. They had names like the Fool and Queen of Cups and the Wheel of Fortune. Rainbow was convinced Mars was really a very powerful wizard trapped in this world, and that his cards, herbs, and crafts were his way of staying in touch with the place he came from. Even though Ashley had threatened to whip her ass if she ever went to Mars's, she never said anything against going into the woods. Rainbow loved the woods, the patch of morning glory in the clearing under the big oak trees, the gap in the trees where she could see the first stars emerge in evening if she stood just beneath it, the toadstools that would pop up after a rainstorm, the birds and squirrels flitting through the trees, the rabbit hole full of baby rabbits she once discovered while looking for fairy doors, and the creek, even though it was full of trash, protected by a gully of thorns. She imagined the creek must be hiding something very important if thorns had grown over it like that. Perhaps pearls. She'd read in a library book that pearls were really dragon eggs that only hatched if they stayed nestled in muddy creek beds for 1,000 years. She wasn't sure if dragons would pick Tanglewood Creek as a breeding ground. Surely there had to be less polluted places, but maybe it was the most inconspicuous place on an ever-crowded globe. It was fun to think there might be dragons waiting to hatch right there in Little College Station, Texas. Rainbow never felt lonely in the woods. But the best place of all was Toyland. Whenever Ashley worked the night shift at Daisy Dukes, was on a date, or sleeping a dreamless, exhausted sleep in her bedroom, and there were no library books and the Michelle Branch and Nickelback CDs were scratched, and she did not feel like making pastoroni or Stouffer's lasagna for herself, when Rainbow got especially lonely, she would dart out the screen door, or slip the screen off her bedroom window if Ashley was home, run past Dinosaur Garden, Goldfish World, and Mars's Palace, circumvent the edge of the Dragonwood, and keep running until she reached the farthest corner of the trailer park, until she reached Toyland. Toyland was a dirt pile full of broken bicycles, doll parts, board games with only the boards, sun-bleached rocking horses with cracked wood, stuffed animals missing eyes and limbs, tea sets with broken handles and missing pieces, plastic castles with all their people missing, old engines from cars, broken boom boxes, an old tin Chinese checkers set with most of the parts still inside, pieces of a plastic doctor set, scattered tiny plastic farm animals, an original strawberry shortcake doll made of cloth, and an old baby crib with mildew clinging to the dingy beige interior. No one ever came to Toyland except to throw things away, so it was safe. It was where toys went when they were no longer loved or no longer abused, but Rainbow loved them all. She made a barn out of collected twigs, pebbles, and string for the plastic horse, cow, sheep, pig, and 2 chickens molded together. She bandaged the missing limbs and eyes from the stuffed animals with the doctor's kit and made a home for them in the crib, which she covered with a tarp from a discarded tent to keep out the rain. Strawberry Shortcake lived there too. Rainbow wondered if Strawberry missed her friends, but thought she seemed happy to have made new ones. Rainbow played Chinese checkers with the rocking horses, and when they were bored, she sat next to them, but not on them. She didn't want to damage their already cracked wooden backs, which she wasn't sure were injured from exposure to the elements or cruel, stupid children who didn't know how to treat them properly, and pretended she was running with them, that they were on great adventures in brutal, beautiful, unknown lands. She made her toy friends lunches of mud pies and dewberries and mint leaves from the woods and served it in the broken tea set. She brought library books and sat underneath Mama Bear, a giant stuffed polar bear probably wanted some carnival booth and promptly discarded for her bulky frame. and read stories out loud to the stuffed animals, farm toys, and rocking horses so they could enjoy them too. She didn't care that the red dirt stained her shorts and grime from the toys got under her fingernails and caked her hands and face, or that Ashley always yelled at her to take a shower when she got home. She loved Toyland more than any place else in the world, no matter how dirty it was. She worried about her friends when it was rainy or cold, but knew that they had probably been through much worse and were just happy to have a safe place to live out their lives in peace. Rainbow knew she wouldn't live in Tanglewood the rest of her life. She was small, but smart, and wanted to see the far-off places she read about in her books, dreamed up in her head. But for the moment, in the middle of Tanglewood Trailer Park at the edge of College Station in the middle of a lonely Texas prairie, surrounded in a haze of drugs and decay and adult disillusionment, with her library books and rain puddle and succulent garden and muddy goldfish pot and Wiccan neighbor and polluted creek and broken toys, she was happy to.
Stephen.
The man in the corner. It's too bright in here, I say, turning out the lights. Most of these days, I'm told, he begins, I'm told, most of these days begin abruptly if someone even bothers to begin them at all, shaking violently as he scrubs his arm along the top of the three-legged desk, as he writes feverishly and recklessly, as the night refuses to end and so becomes long and dull, leading only to more shaking, as though it was a cowardly leg that broke off from that table to go running highways, to go plop, plop, plopping down interstates at speeds no greater than a quarter mile an hour, a thin, useless leg, but a hopeful one, which is more than an arm can say, as it spills out so much that, along with the motions of the desk, it's enough to make one sick, especially the stagnant kids today, or at least the poor ones who sit around the most, waiting for him to finish what he's writing, or so I'm told most of these days. How can you keep writing, I ask? How can you keep writing even after the whole page has been covered? And not just on the lines, not just in the margins, not even just after the words overlap and crisscross, fighting for salience, fighting until they're purple and bloody and senseless, when they've lost all meaning, all being, everything, even their letters, even Q, who said she would never even dream of leaving. How can you keep writing, I ask, after the paper has gone completely black with ink, and your cursive strokes leave ripples less significant than those of the smallest pebbles falling into the wine-darkest sea, your dark page now only eating words up as quickly as you can set them down. And maybe that's the rub, why you have to keep writing, even after someone's turned off the lights and you can't even see the desk or the paper, or if you're even writing.
Magic Jack. You, yes.
So we're moving from summer into fall, and this was actually also influenced by a piece of artwork that I saw. It's called Summer's Hell, Fall is the Grace. Summer's hell and heat and beating sun, hope but the dusk and nighttime breezes may come, some promise of chance reprieve to lie in bed with hope to sleep, but only to sweat wet the bedding's pillow and sheet. Summer's hell, fall is the grace. Fall is the grace, the time that green leaves us. Each leaf that was summer green now turns colors. Fall is the pattern of colors quilted in layers. Now the days are fair and cooler, the nighttime air to sleep well now and dream. From our window view, we see all of nature's show. All so slow in motion does it go. And we rest now, taking refuge in our chair, napping there. End.
Kaye, Abikhate.
Yay, Kaye.
Thank you
for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate being here. First time at Malvern Books. Thank you. My name is Kaye Abikhate. I have 3 books. Childhood in the Third Reich. That is about the Second World War, when I was in my childhood. The second is a book about Paris, particularly, Club de Poets. And the third is Lyrics of Lebanon. My last name, Abikhate, is Lebanese. My husband was Lebanese. And he was project engineer on the Memorial Stadium, East Side, the Bubble, etc., etc. So I was privileged to be married to a smart man. I have a bit, I'd like to read you a few lines of the first book. When we were children and lived in Berlin, life was regulated and never changed, except of course on Sundays. We always had visitors, and the whole house was clean. Those days, our house teemed with friends and relatives who stayed until all hours. Life was happy, we were happy, life was good, the world was good. However, when I was 6, first grade, those former days, cold winters, hot summers, were short-lived. Soon, no visitors came. Adults were impatient, frustrated, fearful, angry, often at odds with one another. Children tiptoed around the edges of their arguments, surprised, confused, panicked, and mute. And I tell about the Second World War. Do you want me to read one more? Yeah, can I speak? From the Paris book, I attended a workshop over there, and I watched people. It was very interesting. We had dinner at La Coupole, the in place of all the artsy word. And it was always full, and you had to have reservations. If you didn't, you were out of luck. And this is about a situation at La Coupole. The famous place bursts with the have-to-be scenes, the want-to-be scenes, and those just nosy enough to check them all out, shuffling 4 deep at the bar, impatient for tables, envious for those who have reservations. A table for 1, 2 glasses of champagne, 1 rocking a cherry on rising bubbles. He sits diminutive, his age shrunk into the tailored suit, and he looks across his table, eyes deep in mental conversation with an imaginary partner. Table set for 2, 1 seated, 1 served, reminiscing, a lonely octogenarian celebrating. Captivated, I turn to him. Pardon, may I ask? You may not, was the instant curt reply, and I wished to have been the one he so loved. From Lyrics of Lebanon, family ties. A beautiful morning, all early sun peeks over the mountains in golden blaze. Most are still asleep. Amal, that's my sister-in-law, climbs 20 flagstone steps, appraises roses, inhales their fragrance, glides along the walk around the porch, and takes a seat under the giant sequoia where Sarah and Fuad take in nature's quiet, meditative peace. A breeze whispers through the branches. They sit and sip from demitasse, the sweet caffeine of Arabic coffee, finely ground, that settles at the bottom. When finished, each turns their cup onto the saucer. They talk about plans for the day, enjoy the peaceful morning, and listen to its wakening life. Distant traffic invades their reverie. Sarah takes her sister-in-law's cup, carefully turns it up, reads coffee grounds, and tells what will be her future that day. She then asks for her husband's cup, who scoffs and leaves to tend the garden where he spades carrots, peaches, apples, cucumbers. In an undertone, Sarah confides, I must watch him today so he won't catch cold. The telephone rings.
Man is severed yester to tomorrow. The Lester that's in here is my middle name. In the box, spark of madness. The Joker is the jester in the Lester in the box. That is beside another box, where in night quill chills I miss do spark madness. Adrift window blue screams when words crashes before and all around you. That dump that feels like CRAP, parentheses, conservative, Republican, American, progressive, that has screwed up your life with the CRABS crabs all over you. Conservative, Republican, American, bureaucratic, and the other name for CRAP. Inside a hole filled in quagmire insanity that pawns life into war chess games. A checkmate bears a trump thumping upon a royal flush that did dump words where one has to crawl under crying sheets that plied a bed into a quiver of lime deposits, eating away in quicksilver rivers, R.I.P. of insanity. Wham, bam, thank you for your service. Bang, bang, bang. JFK, RFK, MLK volley. That says an American dream in Trump reality, into pyre ash cremation frying up veteran hope. America love me not, Republicans love me not. Hear ye the insane, we need troops on the ground. Over here, over there, over Dale, overseas in Death Valley. That the body bags arise like mountains hidden from view. Wham, bam, God bless America, hear the red, white, blue screams. Shiver, sliver, skeletal bones, shorn away limbs upon soldiers. Wham, bang, 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 hear the trumpet and gun final salute. As funeral drum cadences weep the Celtic body back echo, hollow background. Those flooding tears that flow in quagmire rivers that spark the madness. Hear the spark inside a box, then closing the door into that madness. That alone, inside being so alone, the living suicide of creation dumps. One opens the door, wasted, an empty shell inside this hell of Hail Marys and Our Fathers. That God does not belong in Caesar's, Washington's, Detroit, compassion, devastation. That the House of Crabs and the Senate of Overlord Crap trumps America in those royal flushes that leaves America in Agent Orange defoilant VA care. The Joker in the Jester, Jack in the Box, with Lester Microsoft Blue screens. The Mercedes Terminator for poet, shackle chain depression that rains down. The shell in the hell of America where God is used with Vane's wealth of human misery. Police state that feeds off poverty to feed those Robin Hoods of special interest. They deny Jesus inside their church, that to feed homeless who served America is a crime. That stateside military cadet high school Americans trump us as MCHSA graduate heroes. From the elite who then use poverty pawns to wage their war. Inside war is endless circle jerks. Revolving around 10% making profit from human misery, saying, you are not due entitlements. We have to pay Congress like corporate CEOs. Who are we, the corporation of, I just put my eye out, 2015 America. That we, the people, have capitulated 1776 to reinstall the British East India Corporation, whose corporation and right to work legislation terminate for poetry on an American veteran, who with God's help has weathered as a poet into a Ben Franklin free speech press insane image. Never under tyranny surrender, that spark of madness that makes you insanely nuts. Thank you.
Our last poet of the evening, Thom the Wool Poet.
And Magic Jack, I hope.
And Magic Jack, I hope he is back. Still.
Well, did you know that the definition of a human being is one that can recognize itself as human? And there are certain species, if you put a mirror up to them, do not know what they are. Gorillas, dogs, gibbons, monkeys, and pigeons failed the mirror test. Brain surgeons now use 3D printed models to replicate cerebella to cut out toxic cancers. We know of claustrum and gamma wave activities which diminish during your sleep time, yet consciousness defining us eludes both maths and scientists and remains a poetic and philosophical conundrum. What does it mean to switch off a brain-dead patient? How explain those without cerebella like cockroaches still capable of motion? How fix blind sight where damage to the visual cortex is due to a stroke or tumour, not the optic nerves themselves? And why must we focus upon the broken brains of our society, those with brain damage, epilepsy and strokes, as a means of healing healthy minds? Media and movies make zombies, Frankenstein creatures, clones and replicants as fantastic adaptations. But we are human, with self-recognition and cognition, and no real means to define ourselves as human. Tell me, does human include Pol Pot, Hitler, Charles Manson, mass murdering monsters? Or are there certain creatures, as the Navajo say, in human skin who never learned how to be human, remaining feral, wild, and self-obsessed to the point of narcissism? Ask Kanye West, ask Donald Trump. Dali's masturbatory fantasies, Baudelaire's praise of opium, Van Gogh's absinthe. Why do you think he cut his ear off? Burroughs' heroin, Bukowski's alcoholism, Leary's LSD, Ginsberg's marijuana. One asks, is art best served by accelerants, by madness or repose? Kubla Khan, Coleridge's laudanum-inspired dream, those who channel ghostwriters, those inspired creators who steal from your dreams, visions and projected fantasies. There are so many people who still do not believe that they can create their own projected fantasies. I say, let them come to Malvern Books today and buy these works, if only to prove or disprove the quality of consciousness comes from the spark of madness.
Thank you all for coming out this afternoon. It's a lovely day. It didn't feel like searing heat beating down on me as I was walking. Our next show is October 11th, of course, that is the second Sunday of the month. And the theme is Things Under the Bed. When's the last time you looked? That may be your next source, literally, of inspiration. All right, I always make this offer. Shall we help with the chairs being moved over that way?